Good morning, everyone. Good evening to Dr. Takahashi. It gives me great pleasure to be introducing Kenji Takahashi, whose work I've been following keenly over the last few years. Really exciting material he's been unearthing from the sort of early yoga traditions. Dr. Takahashi is an assistant professor affiliated with the Graduate School of Humanities and Sociology at the University of Tokyo. Did his PhD at Kyoto University. And the title of the thesis was Manas, or Mind, in the Didactic Discourses in the Mahābhārata. And Dr. Takahashi has published several articles on related topics to do with the Mahābhārata and so forth, but also on material and practices from the Shiva Dharma corpus. I think, were you working with the Shiva Dharma project based in Napoli, in Naples?
Yes.
Yeah, the ERC project. And his current research interests is really early Sāṃkhya-Yoga philosophy and didactic discourses in the Mahābhārata and the history of Shaivism. And today, the title of the talk today is Physiological Teachings of Yoga as Found in the Mahābhārata. So particularly intriguing for me, and I'm really looking forward to this. So thanks so much for joining us. Over to you, Dr. Takahashi.
Thank you so much for kind introduction. Let me start my talk. Okay, I will share the screen. So can you see the slides? Okay.
Yes.
So yes, thank you. So let me start. Thank you for introduction. My name is Kenji Takahashi from Tokyo. And today's talk is about physiological teaching of yoga as found in the Mahābhārata. So today I'm going to talk about why I study Mahābhārata, and then talk about control bodily channel, and also what's in the head, what ancient Indian people think in the head, and then embryology and evolution theory. So before starting this talk, I want to have a very small cautions for those people attending and then listening to this kind of talk for the first time. Today's talk contains lots of sexual descriptions, and to make it worse, its content is very much androcentric, which means that it's male-oriented and it's only from the male perspective, and then it has a lot of pejorative descriptions for women. So, but the purpose of this lecture is to, not to make you believe in it, but for a better understanding of various types of early yoga and their implications for later development. So don't feel offended, and then you may feel offended, but this is just the fact and then how they think. And I believe that this kind of investigation makes it easier to understand what they think in reality. So let me start. Okay. So first I'm going to talk about why the Mahābhārata. So Mahābhārata means the great epic of the Bharatas, or the great war of the Bharatas. And it is believed to compose sometime in between 2nd century BC to 4th century AD. Okay, it's 600 years. So it seems that there are several stages of compositions. And the main plot is the conflict between the Bharatas and the Kauravas, who are kins to each other. So by killing the kins, or by killing the relatives, the main figures feel a lot of agony or lots of like sorrow during the battle. And so the main figures, that is Arjuna and Yudhishthira, feels a lot of agony. And there's a series of philosophical or didactic discourses to make them understand what the life is, what sin is, what the rightful thing is. So this is the starting point of this expansion of the text. And so once this kind of expansion has started, it's very kind of limitless. So you see that it has become a work of imposing size. And this Mahābhārata is this yellowish book, just that's occupying 2 shelves of this book, and you can see that how big it is. So, and some portions of the didactic discourses in the Mahābhārata are closely related to the main plot, but not part of them. So it's a kind of a loose collection of discourses. So, and then quite hard to read, especially those who are interested in the story of the Mahābhārata, and not to mention the work of editing the work. But in the past, or maybe from 19th century to 20th century, there are a lot of people who say like epic Sāṃkhya or epic philosophy. But I feel that it's a loose collection of discourses. And then the editorial principle of the composers seem to lie in just collecting discourses according to some thematic threads. So it means that it's not totally related. It's not totally unrelated to the work, but they do not seem to attempt to combine unifying theory, etc. So there are several attempts to restore a kind of unifying epic Sāṃkhya or epic philosophy underlying all the discourses, but it seems as it's not very, promising way of research. So what I think is, what makes this Mahābhārata is interesting is that, especially due to the lack of these strong editorial principles, Mahābhārata has worked as a kind of time capsule for various discourses. So the Mahābhārata preserves those unique and intriguing discourses that may not have been transmitted otherwise. And so because there was not so much editorial principles, so the editors do not seem to be so much interested in altering or changing the text according to their likes. So they are different from the classical doctrines of South Asia. And it is true that they are not entirely free from later accretions or modifications, but across a philological probe into the transmission, the text gives a rather vivid view of the philosophical teachings of the time. So as Jim mentioned, I am also working for the Shiva Dharma project, which is located in Naples. And then, as you may know, Naples has a Pompeii and Vesuvius. So I feel like I'm like an archaeologist who found Pompeii for the first time. As you may know, this Vesuvius, like 2,000 years ago, has, sudden volcano explosions, and these ashes covered all the cities around it, that is Pompeii. And it was too unfortunate for those people who were living there, but it's too fortunate for those archaeologists who excavated after 2,000 years ago. It's very free from any modifications, and sometimes these artists and archaeologists makes very bad remakings or modifications to the artifacts, but it's totally free from this kind of things. And not only you can see that this is I think this was a kind of temple or shrine, but also these types of this food stand in which these normal people used to convey, and even the breads that they used to eat, and it's carbonized bread. So I feel like if you read Mahābhārata, you feel that this kind of things, so many various things, and it's sometimes not related to each other, but it's it's not true. It's true that it's not intact. I mean, there are some modifications in the course of transmission, but it seems that these vast things that you find, and it's enormously interesting. And then I've been working for the Mahābhārata more than 10 years, but I never get bored with the content. So that's how makes the Mahābhārata very interesting. So let's have a look at how it is, right? So the first part of the thing is that about the control of body channels. So this is one of the articles, is based on the articles that I wrote, and I found that I met Jim only once in a conference in Krakow in person. I think we met several times online, and then this is the time that I talked about these things. So, and then it's about the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma part, that is Mahābhārata 12.203 to 210. And this is one of the less studied ones because this text is very difficult to understand, and there seems to be lots of confusions on the part of the editor. So on the part, if you just read it, it does not make so much sense, but it has a lot of interesting ideas incorporated into the text. And also influence from or interaction with Indian medical traditions, this Āyurveda. And it is also mentioned Atreya, or who is thought to be the teacher of the Āyurveda in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma. So it's a kind of very interesting, crossroad of Ayurvedic traditions and so on. It's also, as the title suggests, Vārṣṇeya suggests, it has partly Vaishnavistic, but it's not entirely. And as my PhD thesis was about manas, so it has an interesting idea about manas and bodily channels and chastity. So let's look at this kind of thing. So this teaching has interesting, both system body channels. There's the Mahābhārata, this mind conveying channel in the center of the heart. And then you see that I'm not very good at painting or this PC painting. And then I intentionally make it like very vague because there's not so much details about it. So we don't know whether how long this duct was or how big was this, but somewhere in the heart, so it is said. And then there are 10 channels from the Mahābhārata channels, and thousands of finer channels from the 10 channels go spread all over the world, all over the body. So it works for the circulation of nutrition and conveying sensations, and passions overwhelms manas. And then it results in the ejaculation of semen. So how it's interesting is that, okay, in the case of this manas, so this central channel is called Mahābhārata channel. And then this Mahābhārata, why it is said manas conveying? So manas is connected to various sense and sense faculties, and it governs perception of sensations moving through the channels. So because this, it seems that this the other channels also conveys the manas, and then also works for the manas to convey the sensations and so on. And the manas is subject to sexual temptations. And then in the case of ejaculation, semen, in a modern science, we know that there's a place to make the semen, but in the past, or in the Āyurveda tradition, semen is considered to disperse in all different parts of the body. And in the time of the ejaculations, Mahābhārata channel collects it and ejaculates it. And then this is a kind of personal communication from a scholar in the Āyurveda. And he says that, okay, maybe because semen becomes a complete man when it is become embryo and when it is born. So he thinks that, okay, this, the reason why semen is considered to be spread all over the world, all over the human body, is because, like semen has to take some parts from different parts of the body to be a complete human. So he said that that is the reason why, that may be the reason why semen is considered to be dispersed all the parts of the body. But he does not say anything to prove it. But I think it's a very good idea to explore it. So, and then, so it's about chastity, and the doctrine of manas and body channels are intended to encourage yogins to practice chastity. So by maturing one's understanding and by getting rid of passions, rajas, from manas, one attains mental power to, mental power to sustain this knowledge, and also to keep the chastity, and then to lead the moksha. And then how this liberation is possible is that liberation through the Mahābhārata channel at one's last moment. So it's interesting that, okay, when this, this liberation is possible is not very clear in early texts. So like, it seems that these texts seems to take that this liberation, the final liberation, comes at the time of death. And then the idea that the liberation while living is possible seems to be very late. Anyway, so at the time of the death, one attains perfection by conveying the manas to all the parts of the body through the Mahābhārata channel, and by pushing out the pranas. So in a perfect state, manas is said to connect with knowledge and pervade the whole body, and luminous and divine and free from rajas. So rajas has several meanings, that it's stain and passions, and one of the gunas of the Sāṃkhya doctrines. So in any case, so and then what does this means is one of the questions I want to explore a little bit. And then why, so we say that manas is luminous and divine, and why this manas is called to be luminous and divine? This luminosity, this text explains. For one who controls his sense faculties and holds the manas under the control, divinities shine forth and delightfully go to him as the Lord. For one whose manas is properly connected to them, that Brahman shines forth. When all of them ate him, so have departed from the practitioner, one becomes fit for being Brahman. So it seems that this luminosity of manas is associated with the sense faculties as divinities. So in the ancient Indian text, that sense faculties are often said to be devatas or divinities in the perfect states, and this appears to be the reason why the manas is called divine. And also, this experience of light is very interesting, and I don't, I cannot figure out exactly why they think that these are shining. But for example, the word devata comes from the deep, this heaven, and then also the heaven, and then this deep also has the meaning of the shining. So it seems that the word itself has the meaning of the shining force, but also maybe it comes from the experience of the yogins. Maybe they have felt some lights in it. So, but this is one of the things that I want to explore more about this experience of light and the experience of fire. So, and also, like in the modern mind, like we distinguish between light and fire, but in this light and fire, because light and the fire as heat is considered to be something different. But if you look at the Mahābhārata, it seems that they don't distinguish between light and fire. So, and then in the modern world, we can distinguish we can see something light, some light without any heat. But maybe in the past, it's impossible for them to distinguish between light and fire. You see that the sun is very warm and heating. So it seems that this is just my feeling, but it seems that this heat might have experienced as something that always comes with the light. So maybe this how they feel about this light and fire is also one of the things that I want to explore. Yeah, for my future works. Anyway, so a little bit of diversions. And then, so how they come up with this idea of this liberation. So there's some Vedic forerunners and Shatapata Brahmana. I talked about the sun, and in the Vedic rituals, the sun is considered to be the god of the death. And then sun swallows the water from the living beings, as well as the life breezes. And then the sunlight, rays of the sunlight is called Rashmi. And Rashmi also means the lanes with you in the chariot to control the like horses. So you can see that this image that the sun is governing all the living beings with his reins as Rashmi. So I like this idea of Rashmi as a lane. And then according to them, the sun daily swallows the water from the living being, and at the time of death, like they swallow the life breezes, that is prana, from the living people, and that's how they die. And according to this time, like if you do a daily performance of Agni-Hotra ritual to pour the butter into the fire daily, and then there's exemption, like you can go to the world of the immortal gods. But if you don't do that, you have to punarmrityu, rebirth, which means that you can stay in the heaven for a while, and you have to return to the world. So that is what they said there. So, and then this seems to be not so much related with what we have seen, Bob, but in later Upanishadic texts, this image is further developed into a kind of moksha thing. So in the Chandogya Upanishad, which I think like 200 or 300 years later than Shatapata Brahmana that we have seen, like and then there's an interesting part of the Chandogya Upanishad. And then I said prose part because what is said in the prose is something different from the verse part we are going to see. And then it is often the case that Chandogya Upanishad or other Upanishad quotes a verse and makes explanation of something. And then this verse may come from something different sources, but then Chandogya Upanishad had something similar ideas and then make expositions. But it is often the case that this verse, the content of this verse is not entirely matching to the contents of the prose part. So anyway, let's look at the prose part first. According to this system, the sun is said to adore to the heaven. And for the first time in this literature, this Rashmi is said to be connected to the bodily channels of the human being. And then at the time of death, with the sound Om as a charioteer, with the sound Om as a charioteer, the spirit is said to be going up above. And those with knowledge go to the immortality, and those without knowledge does not go to the immortality and have to return to the world. So that's the first thing. And so one of the new things about this is that the sun is said to be connected, this Rashmi, or the rays of the sun is said to be connected to the channels of the bodily channels of the human being. And then by going this way, by taking this road by the sun, it's said that the spirit goes to the sun, and then the sun is said to be the door to the heaven. So those with knowledge can go, but those without knowledge cannot go to the heaven and have to return to the world. So, and then the other difference is that those who know the knowledge, and then in this passage, what this knowledge means is not specified, but like in the Shatapada Brahmana, it was just daily performance of the Agnihotra, and then the content, the key to the door of the heaven is something different. And then if you look at the verse part is more interesting. And it says that one of the channels from the heart is connected to the head. And with the sound Om as a charioteer, it goes to the heart. And those with the knowledge go to the immortality, and those without the knowledge, they don't go to the heaven. So it seems that this is the first time in the Chandogya Upanishad that this central body, it's not central, it's not very central because it's just one channel. So we are not sure, but we can say this is central thing. But one single channel is specified as connected between the sun and the person. So in the prose part, the earlier part, there's several channels are connected to the sun. So there is some slight difference between the two. So when compared to its Vedic foreigners, so the continuity, we can see that the central channel in the heart and the utilized bodily channel at the time of death. So this continuity is also psychological as well as physiological sophistications. So physiological means manas as the mediator, and passion and its control. And physiological is circulation of nutritions and perspiration and ejaculations. So maybe one could say that this is one of the forerunners of the Sushmina doctrine, which in later Hatha-Yoga text, or Bindu doctrine, this accumulation of semen. So, but it is never said that you have to accumulate semen. So it's not exactly the forerunner, but it is a kind of focusing on the semen. So that is one of the interesting part. So then the next thing that I want to discuss is what's in the head. So as we have seen, like the head is not focused on the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, which I have seen, but this head appears in the Chandogya Upanishad. And then, so when I make classes, I often make these questions. Where do you think is your self or mind, or center of consciousness, or whatever you like, is located in your heart, in your body? So most of the people, like, I don't know, I have never made this question abroad, but most of the people in Japan think that they are in the heart. So and then when I ask them why, because for example, when you fall in love with somebody, like you feel that your heart is beating, and then not so many people say that they think that they are in the brain, but they still feel that their self is still in the heart. That is one of the interesting things that I found. But yeah, like in the Japanese literature, that your heart is trembling, you say, but maybe you don't say that your brain's trembling or something. So I think that our literature also signifies that we feel something consciousness in the heart. And maybe some, materialists would say they are in the brain. And then maybe after 1 year of the bachelor, after learning some Buddhist philosophy and so on, or nihilistic things, they sometimes they say there's no such thing as a self or mind or center of consciousness in the body. But yeah, like in my impression that when I make this question to Japanese people, I feel that most of the people think that they are in the heart. So I also feel that when I ask a question, I often say that they are myself in the heart. But okay, that is also the case with the ancient Indian people. Generally speaking, the heart is considered to be as a place of the self, and the mind. So there are lots of important studies about this heart. So for example, heart in the Upanishads by Patrick Oliveri or Sven Zellerman's work on the heart in the Mahābhārata, and also this is from students from University of Tokyo. Like it's also in the Rig Vedic part. It's said that the poetic inspiration comes from the heart. So it seems that the heart is something very important. And as we have seen this, we see that heart is the center of the bodily channels, and which is also partly true. So that is what they said. But so what's in the head? So this is my question. Do they think that head is meaningless? So generally speaking, the ancient Indian did not seem to place a high value on the head, and as well as the brain. And there are several important exceptions, that is Chandogya Upanishad and so on. And then this part is partly inspired by James McHugh's keynote speech that I recently attended. It's leaky battery head marrow, the brain in early India. That was extremely interesting things. And recently there is a study by Sacha Robotsky about Indo-Iranian origins of this word. So to sum up the McHugh's keynote speech, this head, the word head appears mastika, and then also appears in the Rig Veda, but it's very scarcely mentioned, and it's considered to be there is a kind of white substance or melty substance, battery substance in the head. And then it's interesting that in the Charaka Samhita, each amount of the bodily, components is specified, and then it says that it has just half Anjali, the half of the Anjali is this Anjali part, and this is the same as the Shukra. So it's very interesting that how they think about the brains. So, but it seems that it's not so much mentioned so much in the brain. So this is something that he has not published any articles yet, but I hope that he will publish a book or article based on his talk. So let's look forward to what he is going to publish. But for my part, this McHugh did not discuss is this Agnicharana ritual in the Vedic. So it's the falcon-shaped altar, and then as you see in the past and on the right, it's a falcon-shaped altar, and the sacrifice right on the falcon, according to Black Āyurveda, or becomes the falcon as Prajapati. And then what is special about this? So this bird is something very significant. It's very huge, so you can look on the internet that there are several Agnicharana revivals, so you can watch it on the YouTube. But what is special about this Agnicharana ritual is that they put the heads of human being. Yes, this is one of the rare example of the human sacrifices in the Vedic, and horse and cow and goat and snake. And generally speaking, the head part is avoided in Vedic ritual, but it's something very special about this part. And it's not so much studied about this part of the ritual and why they use the brain. And then there are several recent studies by Isawa Atsuko, but unfortunately they are in Japanese. So, but you can download it online, and then you can see because she quotes a lot of a lot from different literature, so you can see the text. So I think they are extremely interesting. So this is based on her studies. So, and then according to the text, the head itself is not fit for the ritual because basically they don't use the head for the normal rituals. So first says it is devoid of 20 parts. So they purchase beings with compensate them by 21 beings. And then I really don't know what these 21 beings stand for. And it's interestingly, they say that they are devoid of 7 pranas. And then they compensate the lack of 7 pranas by putting the anthill with 7 holes. So Isawa observes that this 7 holes and 7 pranas corresponds to 7 orifices, separate opening places. That is 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 2 noses, and 1 mouth of the head. And then in the ancient literature, this prana is one of the very controversial word when it is appear in the especially in the plural. And then this says that elliptic plural standing for something plural beginning with pranas. So, and then, so we actually like this number fluctuates. So we really don't know what this 7 pranas standing for. But sometimes it's 5 sense faculties with manas and bhaj. So this kind of 7 is always possible. So it's very difficult to determine what it really stands for. And then also, interestingly, the Shatapatha Brahmana, according to Shatapatha Brahmana, he said that Prajapati first performs the ritual only with the head, thinking that Shris. So if you know the Sanskrit, Shri is somehow similar to the word head, that is Shiras. So there's a kind of etymological connection. They are trying to make etymological connection, but it was incomplete. Then he makes the Atman by water and earth. So this water and earth stands for bricks. So this means that, I think that this means that they put the head, and then by putting the bricks on the top of it, they make the whole body. So yeah, so this is not very clear yet, but this kind of thinking is very important. And then I feel that this is one of the rare mentions of the head rituals, head related rituals in the very old period. It's like five, I think it's the first millennium of BC, before century. So even though it is predominantly the Vedic culture is predominantly about the heart, but it's also interesting. So lastly, about the Charaka Samhita, I found this interesting passage. I will read the translation, that in which pranas and all the sense faculties of living beings having pranas are located. That is the foremost part of the body parts. It is called head. So this Charaka Samhita also thinks that pranas is in the head, and it says that Uttamanga. So the above verse appears in the description of the head diseases. So maybe this is just pointing out the importance of the head. And then it says Uttamanga, so it's the foremost part, or the most important part of all the bodily parts. But Chakrapani, the commentator, interprets Uttamanga as the uppermost, Parishtanga. So there are some doubts about this. And then finally about the Mahābhārata, this is something different from the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma part, but this is also part of the Mahābhārata. It said that fire is located in the head and protecting the body, and the prana residing in fire and in the head activates the body. So in this way, that even though it is very rare, but I found that there are several passages in which this head is very important, and head is considered to be the status or the place for the pranas and the Agni. And then in this passage, Agni is identified with the fire, it's identified with the self. So even though the heart is predominantly important part, but it's interesting that some passages thinks that the head is important. And then in the later Hatha Yoga text, that for example, like it said that the Sushumna is connected to the head and so on. So, and the head becomes the important part. So I think this could be one of the forerunners of the head worship and head importance. So the last section is about evolution and embryology and evolution theory. So we are going back to the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, chapter 206, and how an embryo grows in the womb of a mother and another chain of suffering initiated by others. That is called passion. So before starting this idea of the embryology in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, I would like to explain about this general idea of pregnancy in ancient India. So the union of male semen, shukra, and female like menstrual blood, that is called rajas or artava or shonita. And then a woman as a kshetra field for male bija. So this is not very sexually good statement. And then there is, it seems that they did not find something corresponding to shukra, ovum, for a female. And then there's a famous Shnahashyapa story in the Aitareya Brahmana. So he says that father enters the wife, having become a gem, that is bija, he enters the mother. In her becoming renewed, he is born in the 10th month. A wife had her name of a wife, Jaya, since in her he is born again. So because he is Jayate. So in this passage, the father is said to be reborn as a son, but this idea is very abundant in the classical period because there is undesired context that the father has more than one self at the same time. So for this program, Oliver has a very interesting discussions and also by Japanese scholar. So, and instead they come up with the idea of transmigrations. So after enjoying the life in heaven, it says that he becomes Akasha, this intermediate space, and Vayu, wind, and Duma, smoke, and Abra cloud, and rain cloud. Pravarashti, it rains, and it becomes Oshadi and the Anna food. So it means that from the heaven, he becomes the rain cloud and it rains onto the earth. And then it becomes the semen for human being, and then it is eaten by a human being, and it becomes a semen, and then becomes a human being. So that is what it said. And then this is just my own idea. That's in classical India, in classical Indian thoughts, there's the order of the 5 elements is said to be Akasha, Vayu, Jyotis, Agni, and Jala, and Prithvi, that space, wind, and light or fire, and water, and Prithvi, that is the earth. So it seems that this order of this transmigration seems to be reflected in this order of the 5 elements. And then there are several interpretations about the order of this elements, but this order seems to be fixed by this Taittiriya Upanishad 2.1, and it's about the 5 elements. And then this Taittiriya Upanishad 2.1 is clearly dependent on this Chandogya Upanishad part. So I feel that, okay, this process of transmigration seems to have something to do with this order of the 5 elements. So anyway, this is not so much related to the topic today. And then I found also an interesting passage. Also, a female also has a semen. And then this is interesting passage, Ashtanga Sangraha. This is like 7th or 8th century. And at the sexual intercourse with a man, the semen of a woman also flows indeed, but it has nothing to do with the embryo. Therefore, it is not considered here. So that is not mentioned in the case of Charaka Samhita or Sushruta Samhita. And this is a very interesting and detailed study of the female blood and human. But I sometimes, it's very too much interpretation that I found that his interpretation is not very useful. But this also has a parallel passage in, for example, in the Sushruta Samhita. So just like a lump of ghee melts when it is placed on the fire, the artava, menstrual blood or vaginal discharge of a female flows. So artava in the sexual intercourse with man. So considering these things, I think that this shukra in this female also has a shukra, has maybe menstrual blood or vaginal discharge is mentioned. Not this kind of type of shukra or ovum, but this kind of idea that female also has a shukra is also one of the things that is different from our idea of the human being in modern times. Anyway, so let's return to the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma. So according to Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, a new life comes into existence from the union of male semen and female blood. A child is born from the male semen, which is produced from a man's desire, and sense faculties such as hearing come into being from the ahankara due to the desire for the objects such as sound and so on. The text concludes that the forms of the sense faculties are hidden in rajas and adults that one should control desire. So let's look into detail what they say. So what it's also meaning of the rajas. So one of the three ignorance qualities in Sāṃkhya doctrines, and it also means dirt or impurity. And in this context, desire, especially sexual desire, in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma. So, and then Jem earlier mentions that this in the personal communication, there can also mean menstrual blood, but this does not meaning does not seem to be intended in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, but in the Amrita City, he recently published this union of Bindu and Rajas in the head. Is also very interesting ideas. And also this connection with this Rajas is something to be explored in the future research, I suppose. So then one, especially a male practitioner, should avoid women. So women contain the textile transmigration, Santara, that Tantra Bahini. By nature, women are fields, kshetra, whereas men are knowers of the fields. Therefore, the wise man should neglect them. I'm not very convinced with him, so I'm just being told that I think I cannot avoid women, but okay. And then it says, these actions whose forms are formidable, perplex the non-clear sighted people, the everlasting form of the sense faculty is hidden in rajas. Therefore, living beings are born from the desire as the seed, whose nature is thirst. So what is this sense faculties? The form of the sense faculties is hidden in rajas. And this further clarifies what it really means. So from the desire for the sound, the faculty of hearing, shrotra, arises for the one whose atma is made. Sorry, I did not make the translation for the latter part. Anyway, so I think it's not important. So for the embryos, this is about the embryos. Embryo has the desire for the sound, and then by this desire, the faculty of hearing arises for the one whose atma is made. So I think this kind of idea that why the sense faculty is made because of this desire is something very interesting idea that I felt. So in the concluding part, it says Indriya Prabhava, the rise of sense faculties, is made by desiring mind, and then this faculties comes into being. And the purpose of the text says Indriya Pralaya, that is the dissolution of sense faculties by the Nirodha, control, and then it says that this leads to the moksha. So it seems that, so the problem that I have is that, okay, the one who has a sexual intercourse with woman is someone different from the embryo. Maybe my father's desire is not related to my desire for the rajas. So it seems that by making it very ambiguity of this kind, it seems that there is an inheritance of rajas from father to the son. And then also, if you know the Sāṃkhya doctrine in the later period, this ahankara, according to their doctrines, ahankara gives birth to the sense faculties. So, and I was wondering, this might be the reason why ahankara, sense faculties, etc., are produced from ahankara. And then before closing this talk, I want to compare with this doctrine with other different sources. So first is the Charaka Samhita, the first millennium AD, and the other is the Garbha Avakranti Sātra, that is the Buddhist text about this. And maybe till the 2nd century, it should have been already made. So it's quite early. And then Mahābhārata is called to be 2nd BC to 4th AD, but I think that the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma most likely belong to the newer layer of the text. Anyway, so and this Garbhavakranti Sutra is very interesting one because it talks a lot about this vagina, how vagina is made and how disgusting this vagina is. And I was wondering how Buddhists know so much details about the vagina and things. Anyway, so if you look at the Charaka Samhita, the Sharira Sthana, chapter 3, like the 6 factors of conceptions of father, mother, husbands, and suitability, and nutrient, and sattva. So the garbha is said to be the union of the semen and female and individual self. So what is derived from mother is skin and blood and so on. Desire derived from Atma is ayus and Atma jnana, knowledge of itself. And then derived from suitability, it's health and diligence. And derived from rasa, development and growth. Derived from sattva. I think this sattva in this case, disposition or something. That is inclination, conduct, and etc. And I found it interesting that there's nothing from the that. So anyway, I was wondering what is comes from the that. Anyway, then it says that there is a monthly descriptions of the embryo. But what is interesting about this embryology is that in the 3rd month, there's a kind of explosive growth. So making of sense faculties and various parts of the body and sensation, etc. And from this 3rd month, it says that Dvaikritya, two-heartedness. And this means that the embryo's heart is connected to that of the mother. So the embryo conveys his or her desires through the heart of the mother. So some texts say that you should not go against the mother's will because this is the desire of the embryo or something it says. So that is interesting thing. And then on the 5th month, this is blood and flesh is made. And then according to Garbhavakranti Sutra, it's very interesting because it has even though the Charaka Samhita is about the monthly development, and it has a weekly detailed descriptions of the gestations of the embryo. And then because this is Buddhist text, so it tries to convey how it is suffering. So the womb and vagina is very filthy and disgusting and full of suffering. So there are lots of different interesting studies about this suffering of the death, suffering of being born. So this Kritza has a recent studies, and then Hara, who has died recently, unfortunately, has also interesting studies about that. Anyway, so if you compare these, there's Vārṣṇeyādhyātma in comparison with Charaka Samhita, Garbhavakranti Sutra, embryology as a way to encourage this passion, and that can be also shared with the Garbhavakranti Sutra, but not in the Charaka Samhita. And the female body as filthy and disgusting things to be avoided, that is in the Garbhavakranti Sutra, but not in the Charaka Samhita. And they also what very, distinguishing idea is this rajas oriented. So it seems that Vārṣṇeyādhyātma is very much focused on rajas as sexual desire, and rajas is the power, rajas is desire as the power to produce different type of things. So to sum up all my lectures about this talk, the Mahābhārata, especially the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, preserves various intriguing doctrines. That is, I talked about bodily channels and brain and head and embryology. And the text is too laconic and difficult that it requires a thorough examination of textual evidence. So I'm now modifying the text of the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma based on one manuscript that's very old 14th century manuscript. And there should be more work on the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma should be done. And then I think that it reproduces a lot of interesting materials. So thank you for listening. And that's all for my talks. So I think it was not 45 minutes, but thank you for listening.
It was almost exactly 45 minutes.
Okay, okay.
Thank you very much. That was great, really rich, really nice, good sort of general overview as well. Thank you for contextualizing all your work, which I think will be very useful for everyone. There's so much in there. So we got time for plenty of questions. There's, as usual, there's the Slido. So I think if you look in the chat, you can see the number to put into the Slido to post any questions. I have a few, as ever. I think one sort of general question that occurred to me is in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, when physiology is taught, do you think it's it's meant to be understood as applying to everyone? It's a general kind of medical theory, or do you think it's being taught as a sort of tool specifically for celibate ascetic practice? I mean, this is something I wonder in terms of the Hatha-Yoga text as well.
I think that the latter case is the case. So even though they think that just this guy have to do this and this, and it gives an impression that it is meant only for those who practice very severe practice of austerity and chastity.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, that leads on to another question I had. So is it, are the practices, I mean, what practices are taught? You think that the sort of physical practices associated with it, the only things that are mentioned are methods of tapas or asceticism?
Yeah.
And are they identified?
Sorry, are they what? Sorry.
Are they identified? Does the text say what practices should be done in this context, or is it just general asceticism, general celibacy, general tapas?
Yeah, there's no clear description, but you should do this and this. But it seems that it is said that it will this kind of things will happen, or this is the process of this liberation is going to be. And then that's why the text just say that's why you should focus on the chastity. You should not have sexual intercourse with women. So, and then thinking that considering this, how this shukra and these things is left to the kind of this, it's on the part of the one who reads what kind of practices were there. But it seems that there's, at least I think that they had a kind of imaginations, or the kind of imagination that this mind is going this way and that way. And if you do this shukra, if you do the ejaculations, that this kind of things happen. And then the text just say, if you just do the chastity and if you just refrain and meditate, but the meditation itself is not very much mentioned. So that it's like Sāṃkhya, like distinguishing between what is dirty and what is not dirty. So that is the thing that is general meditations. But yeah, maybe I cannot get a very good answer. But it's not the practice is not very it's not clearly mentioned, and then just chastity and meditation. So, but it gives an impression that they have some austerity. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So we just have to sort of infer from the context of ascetic practice, I suppose, that are described elsewhere, that this is what they were partaking of. And then in the later Hatha Yoga texts, of course, manas, or the mind, however it's formulated, chitta and bindu, are said to be very closely connected. If you control, and then the breath too. If you control one of those, you control the others. It didn't sound like there was a direct parallel to that in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, but I was just wondering, yeah, or maybe I misunderstood. What can you comment on that as well?
Yeah, that there's no. It seems the pranas, as far as I get the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, the prana is not something important for this author of the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, and then this focus of the mind is more on the part of this. It's more on the moral perspective of the mind, and then it's not as yet. It's not as developed as the later text of the Hatha Yogas are.
So, for example, when you said that the Mano-Vahara channel, signal is distributed around the body, and it collects it for it to be ejaculated. But what's the process behind that? So you did mention about the mind being stimulated and becoming passionate.
Yes. In this part, there's a mention of, as far as I remember, there's no mention of the pranas on this part. And then in the last phase, it says that they pull out all the pranas from the body. That is the only mention that I remember. So it seems that like there are different things that is conveyed, like rasas, or urines, and so on, or nutrients and so on, and blood is also conveyed. But in this way, like this manas seems to be conveying, or the manas is also conveyed through these channels, but the pranas are not mentioned here. But in the case of embryology, this wind, it's called Prajapati wind, makes a very important role in pushing the embryo from the womb and so on. But this is not also mentioned in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma.
Okay, great. And one other question. I was very intrigued when you mentioned that Atri or Atreya is mentioned in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, because I'm currently trying to finish off the critical edition of the Dattatreya Shastra, and of course he is Dattatreya is said to be the son of Atri, and this text is also very closely teaches or forcefully teaches this Bindu preservation paradigm, and it's a Vaishnava work. So in what could you just clarify in what context Atri or Atreya is mentioned within the text? I mean, obviously I'm going to look it up now and add some notes to my edition, but I wonder what the role of Atreya is within the text.
It actually refers to Krishna Atreya, and then there's this Vārṣṇeyādhyātma. In the first part of the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, there's a kind of list of the different types of the knowledge, and then it refers to so there, as far as I remember, there are two parts that refers to Krishna Atreya, and then Krishna Atreya is referred to in two. Right, and then in this part there's a different vidyas is mentioned, and then it says that Krishna Atreya taught Chikitsa. So I think that he taught
Chikitsa.
Yeah. So I think that, for example, it says that in this part, Bharadvajas taught Dhanugraha. So this is a list of the different stories. And then I remember that there is also another mention of Atri. And then in this context, Atri is said to be the authentic teacher of the doctrine that is explained in this chapter. So this Krishna Atreya 12, in the beginning of the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma is just a list of the different knowledges, and then in this 12.207.23, this is a kind of authentic teacher of the Krishna Atreya. But the question is that I could not clarify whether this, the problem of this, whether this Atreya and Atri is different or not. And I'm not very sure about this Atri or Atreya and Krishna Atreya and Atri is maybe someone different. And then because it says Krishna Atreya, it's somehow, this is my feeling, but this is, if they say Krishna Atreya, but by adding Krishna, somehow gives a feeling that this is something Atreya is different. But I feel that 12.207.27, this reference to Atri might be Krishna, this Atreya in the Charaka Sāṃkhya. And then this part is almost contemporary, and then this Charaka Sāṃkhya also has it seems to have a long history. So it is very difficult to say that this comes from the Charaka Sāṃkhya. And also the content of this part is different from Charaka Sāṃkhya. So yeah, this is what I can say about that. But yeah, there are two different types of the Krishna Atreya. And then this Krishna Atreya seems to be different from the Atreya that we know.
Okay, great. Well, I think I'll be looking into that further. I mean, it'd be very interesting if there's, it's going to be impossible to trace probably, but this suggests a direct, a heritage of this Dattatreya yogic system, perhaps. Anyway, I'll look further into it. Right, we've got a couple of questions on the Slido from Ruth Westerby. If we could go to Ruth, please.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. That was absolutely fascinating. Loads of questions. I put two on this. I'll just say both of them if you want. I was wondering if you had come across the term Angirasa in your work, and what what you thought that to mean. Like, is it a correlate of, is it synonymous with rajas, or is it something different? And I'm sorry if I wasn't paying enough attention, but I wondered whether you were equating, or what relationship you saw between rajas guna and rajas's sexual fluid, menstrual fluid. Thank you.
Yes. For the first questions, this angulus is comes from related to angulus. Or what do you, this angulus? So I think I have not came across with this angulus, so I have nothing to add about this. But maybe it would be nice if you could teach me what this refers to in different texts. And for the second questions of the rajas as guna and then rajas as passions, so I think I skipped several important things, but in the Mahābhārata, in the ancient times, this rajas and sattva and tamas seems to refer to the kind of dispositions or the state of the mind of the different people, of the persons. So, and then it has, in the Sāṃkhya, it is developed into a kind of principle of the world. So that, but in the Mahābhārata, there are lots of several parts that seems to intend this rajas or tamas or sattva as a state of the mind. So, and then, so I think that this was later developed into this doctrine. So, and then Johnston's early Sāṃkhya, it was published in 1997. Johnston's very short book has a lot of discussions about this topic of the guna and the relation between guna and sattva and rajas tamas. And then also when I was reading, this is something related, unrelated to the question, not so much related to the question, but when I was reading the Amrita City of the James book, that I found it interesting that only sattva is said to abide by sattva and abandoning rajas and tamas. And then in normal Sāṃkhya doctrine, you have to, give away with all the sattva, rajas, and tamas. And then that is also the case in the early text of the Mahābhārata. So you have to, in the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma also, you also have to preserve the sattva and then abandon rajas and tamas. So that is also discussed by Johnston. And then also this kind of connection is also important, I think. So yeah, this is also the part that I found interesting. So do you have anything about, can you share what do you think about the angulasa or something?
I don't know. I think it's a correlate of rajas, but it's not clear. Jim, it comes up in Jim's, the edition Jim is working on of the Data Shastra. I'd like to know.
Okay. Yeah, I would take a note to this board and then I'd feedback you. Yeah, maybe later I may have write another article based on your question. Thank you very much.
Would you also be able to share the reference to Johnston that you mentioned?
Yes.
I could contact you separately if that's better.
Yeah, I believe we have a plan, which I was going to talk about at the end, for Kenji to share some of the slides from the session today, and we'll be sending those out afterwards as well.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I'll just make a comment on that. Yeah, angurasa seems to be this very, it's an obscure term. It's only used in the Dattatreya Shastra, but pretty certainly seems to be just another name for rajas. But when it's introduced, it's kind of obscure. And in fact, in the new recension, I found some manuscripts that have an extended, different version of the passage. And Interlocutor says, well, what is this angurasa stuff you're talking about? And then then Dattatreya explains that it's related to rajas. But the same text, I mean, so the Dattatreya Yoga Shastra, Amrita Siddhi, their kind of justification for celibacy is very much material, physical, physiological. It's a problem. It's a problem about losing bindu, losing semen.
Okay.
He gets old and dies, and there's no kind of suggestion that it's anything to do with. I mean, I suppose it's some implication that you need to be in control of your faculties and senses, but it's not really said to be in any way moral or ethical or anything like that. And I just wonder if that's the same sense you get from these, from the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma and elsewhere in the Moksha Dharma Parvan. Is this a purely kind of material, physical teaching?
I kind of feeling that this is more about the moral, and then this is a kind of, this part of this physiology is a kind of explanation why you have to do this kind of thing. And then it's more about the moral, and there's also, I think there's also part of the moral about what kind of disposition you have to make for the world. So this idea of this exposition, okay, I think that this is where it started about this, how the ejaculation and so on. But yeah, maybe I read too much about the Mahābhārata, so it gives the impression that it's the moral teaching is the main thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And I sometimes think that with the Hatha-Yoga text, there's less emphasis on that side of things, because they do make an allowance for some yogis to engage in sexual practice, but obviously then they have to hang on to the bindu. So the morality doesn't seem to come into it. It's purely about preserving your vital essences. Okay, we have a anonymous question, which means I have to read it out, and I think it's suitable. I think, could you point to further study regarding the female fluid, in quote marks, that is mentioned? For example, could the female fluid be referring to female ejaculation?
Yes. So this is one of the points that I have not studied too much yet. So but it seems that this in the sexual intercourse, it seems that there is a ejaculation of something that is called in the Sushruta Samhita, it's called Ārtava. So Ārtava comes from the word ritu. Ritu means the season. So in the periodical thing. So the difference between what we know and what they know is that whether this Ārtava has the menstrual blood is not very clear, does not have the seed, but so when it says that it discharges Ārtava, we are not sure whether this discharges is in the womb or uterus, or to the outside of the vagina. So there are two possibilities, and the Ārtava is sometimes said that it has a red, and it's sometimes it's vivarna, it's colorless. So when it is like vivarna, maybe this might be this vagina. I don't know how to call it. This when there's a sexual like this not the menstrual one, but this discharge of the vagina, vaginal discharge. But so there's kind of ambiguities about that, and it seems that it's from the reading of the Sushruta Samhita, it's difficult to decide what it really meant. And then I also, I haven't thoroughly read and examined the book of this Das, this bodily, what was that? Das book. This book about the origin of the life of a human being, conception and female according to ancient Indian medical and sexological literature. So, but I'm not very much convinced with him. So maybe I've also studied a little more about this point, and it might be very interesting for future studies. So that's it.
Thanks.
Yes.
There's a quite a good review of that book, isn't there, by someone called Selby, I think, which is not altogether appreciative. Ruth's nodding.
Yeah.
Engage a bit more closely.
Martha and Selby's review. Anyway, my reading of Das was that it was inconclusive as to whether Rajas is sexual fluid, is like ejaculatory fluid or menstrual blood. I've just actually got Sudhir Kakar and Wendy Donegal's Kama Sutra translation, because I wondered whether there was anything in that on conception. They do have a footnote on all the various different fluids on page 191.
Okay.
The various commentaries.
Okay.
I need to go into more detail on that myself.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thank you very much. I mean, you gave us a content warning at the beginning. I've got a reading of the Dattatreya Shastra this afternoon, which is much more explicit. So I should give more of a concept warning. I think you dealt with that very well. Oh, we've got a hand up. That's not normally how we do this. I don't know if that's deliberate, because we have got a couple more minutes. Andrew Norris, do you have a? This is going away from our usual protocols, but
hang on a minute. I'll just see if I can message. Drew. Oh, there we go. Did you have a question, Andrew?
Yes, sorry, I should read the protocols really. It's actually my first Zoom session, so this is all quite new to me, which is strange from the pandemic. But really, I was interested in, you mentioned Agni-Ultra, perhaps in the context of your lecture is really the only daily practice that came up. I was wondering if there are any other daily practices, and with the Agni-Ultra, whether there was any mention about the effects it had on perhaps the participant and or the environment, or whether there are any recipes and things mentioned in the text with regards its practice.
Sorry, I cannot get the point. So I mentioned Agni-Hotra ritual, right? So
yeah, and you mentioned that if performed daily, then it would sort of get you straight to heaven, if you like. But it was the only mention you made of a daily practice. But then you didn't mention it further, so I was just wondering. It seemed to have a lot of significance, but yet, so I was wondering if there was more about it within the text.
I think I skipped several important explanations. This Agni-Hotra is a kind of very traditional ritual of to put some clarified butter or milk into the fire. Yes, and then it is, so that's I think that's apart from that, I'm not very much into that. And then
yes, I understand what Agni-Ultra is. It's just that you mentioned it as a daily ritual that would, you know, from the text.
have to do it. You have to do it every day. So
were there any other daily rituals mentioned in the text?
I'm not sure. I have it, but yeah, this is the text says that's just Agni-Hotra, but yeah, maybe it's possible that there are several other texts that has daily mentions of daily text, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Sorry, if I can butt in, excuse me for interrupting, but presumably, I mean, that's a very distinct tradition from that of the Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, where they will be assassins and they're not performing.
They may not performing this kind of daily rituals. Yeah, it's like I think compared to daily Vārṣṇeyādhyātma, it's like 1,000 years ago or something. So I think for this part, it's not connected, I guess.
No, but more the kind of the physiological conceptions.
Yeah,
it's related. Yeah,
I suppose that was my interest in that. The earlier traditions seem to have used the ritual of fire, if you like, and these ritualistic sort of almost magic type things, whereas the later practice seems to be more sort of physical, I guess, or self-orientated. Controlling your desires, etc. So because later tradition that seems to have died out a lot. Things like the Agni-Ultra become sort of symbolic rather than practical, if you like.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether they have some philosophical implications in it, but there's an interesting survey by Bodwitz about this internalizations of the Agni-Hotra, and then this pouring some milk into the fire is reinterpreted as digesting fire. So by putting your own food is considered to be the substitute for the Agnihotra. And then if you are, it started when you go on a travel, you can do the fires and so on. So it started this, considerations about this, thinking of this fire as the internal fire, and then thinking that this digestive fire is considered to be the fire of the Agnihotra. So maybe it has started somewhere around that, but maybe Agnihotra ritual itself is not very much developed into that thing, I guess.
Interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Kenji, thank you so much. Yeah, we've taken you a bit over time. That's really fascinating, such rich material. Please keep diving into this stuff that no one else is brave enough to try to make sense of, because there's so many different things going on and so many different things to. But I particularly enjoyed all the contextual material you're looking at, trying to make sense. And I'm sure Ruth was taking a lot of notes as well, because I think, as you know, there's a lot of overlap, or that you're providing nice earlier historical context to what she's working on. So that's great. So just remain, thank you very much. And I will pass back over to Theo now for the final ritual of our usual ceremonial procedure.